Welcome to Dead Drifters Society.
Welcome to the podcast, Court. How's it going?
Awesome. Doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, right on, man. Well, thanks for coming on. That's glad it worked out pretty quick there, so that's nice. That was like a week turnover, not even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's easy when I don't have anything going on at night.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and that's pretty much the only time I can figure out to do things. You said you have three boys?
Yep, 3 boys.
How's that?
It's a lot of fun actually. So they're right in the middle of baseball, sports. They love to fish too. I'm trying to get them into fly tying, and so it's a lot of fun, but it's definitely a lot of busy work. So, but it's awesome.
What's their ages?
I got 11, 8, and 6.
Oh yeah. So that's a lot of energy right there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Lots of fighting.
Lots of fighting. Yeah, boys will be boys.
Yep.
Yeah. And when you said you're getting them into fly tying, is it how's that going?
It's actually, it's pretty easy. They almost get to the point where I'm like, oh, I gotta have you not tie flies with me so I can tie some. They really love it. So every time I get home from work, they're just like, Dad, can we tie a fly? And it's just so it's awesome. It's fun to get them into it and see them learning and growing. But they don't want anything to do with lessons. They just want to put whatever they can on a hook. So that's kind of where they're at right now.
Yeah, I try to get my son to come down when I'm needing to do a little extra computer work or get some flies done for guiding, and so I'll have him come down here and try to bang out a bunch, but it always turns into him sitting on my lap like, we're going to do this, and then I'll like, okay, and he'll be like, let's use deer hair, and I'll like put it on, and then he'll just cut it, hack it down, and I'm just like sitting there like, this is tough. I'm a bit of a I don't tie perfection, but I'm a bit of a perfectionist. Like seeing someone hack up deer hair, even though he's 4, it kind of hits in a weird spot.
It's painful. I have a little box. That they can pull like random crap from that I've bought from shops over the years. I just never tie with. Like, that's your box. Whatever you want out of there, you can use, and they come up with some pretty crazy stuff. It's pretty funny. But yeah, I'm the same way. I'm just kind of like, I'm a technique kind of rule follower, and I'm like, that tail's got to be a certain length. It's like a mile long, and I'm like, no, that's not right.
Yeah. Do you think it'll work? Of course.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, 100% every time.
Yeah.
Every time. What is it? 60% of the time, every time.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, man. No, and it's good to get them into it like that. I mean, I don't regret any of my life, but I definitely wish I would have got into fly fishing way earlier. So I feel like our kids are pretty lucky. I mean, it might not be they might not get addicted like we are, but
yeah. Give them a shot.
Yeah, exactly. And then when they do get addicted, it's like hopefully they're out of our pocket and working for their
exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I bought the Echo Gecko rod. Have you seen that one?
I have seen that one. No, I don't have it, but I've actually cast one. I actually like it quite a bit.
I like it quite a bit. That's where I was leading into.
Yeah.
I was casting it for fun the other day. My son took like 3 casts, and he was like, okay, you do it now. And then he went and did something else. But I was thinking like a dry fly rod. That thing would be pretty sweet.
Yeah, it'd be perfect.
Yeah. Even like I don't know, it feels like a glass rod. It's fun. It's fun. So I'm sure fighting a fish on it would be real good too, but apparently they're indestructible.
Yeah, I know. I just played around with one day, and I was like, gee, this would be a perfect little creek rod. It'd be a great little rod for little hands, so it'd be good for the boys. So
yeah,
it'd be a good rod.
Yeah, man. Court, where are you located? I didn't really go over that one. I know you're in.
So I'm in northern Utah. So Logan, Utah is kind of
Yeah.
my home base. So Utah State University right there. I've grown up here my whole life. Moved away for a little bit down to Salt Lake when I first graduated. But got a job back up here, and I just was like, well, I'll definitely work and live where I grew up. That'd be awesome. So I just stayed back up here, and yeah, so it's just worked out perfect. So I'll get to sit here and fish the rivers I grew up on, and it's awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. How did the whole fishing thing start for you?
So I grew up fishing, just the kind of the traditional way that I think most people start, just dunking a worm, power bait, whatever. My dad would take us out, and about elementary school, fifth, sixth grade, me and my buddies, we loved to fish. We go, I mean, we could ride our bikes down to the Little Bear River, which we have running through our valley, and we just fish our guts out all summer during summer break, and spinners and worms, whatever, and just fishing that little river so much. I got into it, and then my older brother, he bought a fly rod, took some casting lessons, and I was kind of intrigued by that. And I was probably about 12 or 13 at the time, and he didn't really stick with it as much. And so I just kind of started playing around with his rod, in the backyard, casting and doing whatever I could. And that was back before YouTube and all that. So I really kind of just taught myself and just monkeyed around with it. And yeah, I went down to that same river where we grew up fishing as kids, and I just remember I had no idea what a fly was and how to even like cast or how to fish it. So I was using a little bead zug bug, little nymph, and I just cast it downstream, and I was basically just reeling it in like a spinner, just kind of thinking like, oh, this. We'll see if this works. And I caught a fish, and I was like, all right, sweet, my first fish on a fly rod. So it was a little bead zug bug, and from there I was pretty addicted to it. I really wanted to get into it, and luckily I had some good friends of my dad who I found out later that they like to fish, fly fish, and so one of the guys took me and kind of helped me show me how to do that and actually fish dry flies and that. So I've been fly fishing since, pretty heavily since I was 14, and I'm 37 now. So over 20 years, just dedicated to it and love it. So
Yeah, that's pretty sweet too. Does your brother still dabble in it, or is he?
no, he went on to do more upland game hunting. That's his big thing. He loves
Okay.
to travel and do upland game hunting and that. Once in a while we'll take him, but yeah. So I'm really the only one in my family that fishes. So everybody else kind of went their own ways, and big game hunter, construction worker, all that kind of stuff. So I stuck with the fishing side.
Yeah. And what do you do for work?
So I work for Round Rocks Flies, actually. So I actually work in the fly tying industry. Round Rocks Flies is a wholesale fly company. So we sell to shops, to sporting goods stores. So I'm dealing with flies every day of my life, and it's a dream job for me. I love it. It's not what I went to school for but it just kind of happened upon me, and I just wanted to do it. I've always wanted to work in the industry some way, and that job presented itself, and I ran with it, and I've loved it ever since. So I've been doing that it'll be 6 years in December. So I'm working on my 6th year.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. And is it mostly online and then to shops, or is it an actual storefront as well?
So we don't have a storefront. So my boss, Steve, so funny story. So his dad started the shop after he coached at Utah State as the head coach of their basketball team there at Utah State University. He got fired from being the head coach, and he goes on and says, well, I'm going to start a fly shop. So he started Kahn's Trout Shop is what it was called. And long story short, it kind of turned into Round Rocks Flies. It was an actual fly shop for a time. And then he was approached by some guys kind of down south to start tying flies for them. So like Smith and Edwards was kind of a box store. It's just one location there in Utah back in the 90s. They have two now. So we actually started making flies for them. I say they started making flies for them back in the mid 90s. And then we actually started doing all the flies for all the Sportsman's warehouses in the country as well. So
Wow.
that's kind of where they said, okay, the fly shop thing, we're getting way too busy with the wholesale side. So they closed the doors on the fly shop. Someone else took over the fly shop and they stepped away and started doing the wholesale side. And ever since then, they've just been working on, just your basic, kind of standard traditional patterns from dry flies, nymphs, and shimmer patterns. And then when I was going to school, I ran into Steve, who is now the owner, Kahn's son, who now owns Round Rocks Flies. I took his fly tying classes just because I had easy credit and I just would love to tie flies anyways. So I was just all this tie flies every Wednesday night for 6 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
So I did that, and I guess I stuck around long enough. He was just like, "Hey man, do you want a job?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, absolutely." So I was pulling orders in college for him. I graduated with a social work degree, so I actually worked with kids for about 6 years after I graduated. And then I just randomly bumped into him at a Utah State football game, and he's just like, "Hey, I need you to, if you can, come help me. I'm going to buy the business from my dad and start working it, and I need you to come on and run the production side of all of our flies." And I was like, "Sign me up." So pretty easy. I left the other job and I was gung ho about this. So yeah, I've been doing that. So my main role is just the production of all of our flies and quality control and helping design new patterns. And that's kind of where I'm in with kind of like the Euro thing, because I really love to Euro nymph and small streamers is my game. So
Okay, I love it. I got things. I've tied a fly or two in my life. So a lot of the wholesalers, not a lot because there hasn't been a lot, but the ones I've talked to tend to order them from like other countries. Are you actually tying them in house?
No, that's just the same way as all the other wholesalers. So like your Montana Flyer, Umpquas, they're all tied overseas, and that's the same with ours. Yeah.
Yeah, because I got a buddy currently who decided to tie some nymphs and sell them, and then we're breaking down the math, and I was like, man, you'd have to frickin' tie.
Yeah.
If you wanted to make it a business, it's not impossible. It's just you would just be sitting there like he's like, man, I gotta tie 60 of these nymphs. And I was like, imagine how many nymphs you'd have to do to get like a full paycheck.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah. Have you been overseas? Have you ever seen the other side where they tie it and stuff? Or how in contact are you with them, I guess?
I'm very in contact with them, and I haven't been there physically. I've seen it just through video and through pictures, but with technology these days, I can hop on Zoom and I can sit down basically with the tires there and go over quality control stuff and show them how to tie and specific things that I want to see in those flies. So with that, it's gotten a lot easier for us, and we don't have to live over there. Not that I wouldn't want to go over there to see it. I actually would. We've actually got.
Sorry, where is it that they're?
So we've got a couple different factories. We've got factories in Thailand and Sri Lanka and in Kenya as well.
Mm-hmm. Kenya, that's
pull from all of them. Yeah, Kenya's kind of the big one right now. So
yeah, and then how many like fly patterns do you have? Because if you have 3 different locations you're pulling them from, you must be.
Gosh,
there's more than 10, less than a
definitely.
million.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And if
we're close, I mean, we've probably got. I'm just ballparking. We've probably got close to 1,200 fly patterns that we make, something like that. I could be short, but.
Yeah, I last year went guiding in Cranbrook, British Columbia. I don't know if you know where that is. But long story short, before I was leaving, I started like tying some dry flies, and I messaged the guide that I was heading up there with, and I was like, and like, you guys said there's like a lot of flies that I'll need. I'm trying to tie as many as I can, but these dry flies take forever. And he was like, oh, I don't tie any of my dries. He's like, I buy them. He's like, if there's maybe a few that he'll kind of dabble in because there's something specific he wants, but yeah. So that was like actually one of my first introductions to really buying flies. and I have a discount at the shop,
Uh-huh.
and I still ended up spending like $1,200 on flies. So
Yeah. Yeah.
and that didn't even, well, it's the big boxes I get, the ones that have the double size that clamp together or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then obviously people losing flies or they eventually break down. But I myself learned a little bit about the quality control. You can
Yeah.
kind of see it when you look at a fly. If you look at like 5 or 10 of them all the same and you kind of look, you can be like, okay, this one has the right size hackle I want.
Yeah.
Like, I learned to be a little picky within, buying my flies because I was taught to pay attention to a few things. But
Yep.
yeah. Are you guys sending over your hooks and beads that you want used and all that, or are they
Yeah.
getting
So
it
yeah.
themselves?
So one of my main things is the material side of it. So I'm kind of over a lot of the purchasing of all that, the raw material, and then getting it all collected. We ship it to the factory with detailed instruction on how it should look, how the fly should be tied, and they send them back from there. I usually have them send me photos and video of how the flies look before they ship. And then when they get back, I just did this today. I just had a shipment come in and I spent pretty much all day just quality control. And same thing, you just like we're getting zebra midges back, and I'm counting wire wraps and making sure that they're close enough together or not too far apart. And so yeah, it's just
Mm-hmm.
I want that fly to look and feel good when you put it in your box.
Yeah, and then the hooks that you're are you sending the hooks as well? So you said
Yep.
material for sure. So you're sending
Yep.
everything. It's like, here's the package. This is
Right.
what
Yeah.
built. Yeah.
Yep.
How many, like, I guess it's so depends, but like, what's an average order? Like, are we talking 1,000 flies or more? Or?
So for us, like, so for what I send over there,
Yeah, just
so
curious. Like a
when I
ballpark.
usually when I typically do a shipment to go to any one of those 4 factories, 4 or 5 of them, and I'm looking usually somewhere between 50 to 100,000 flies.
Oh wow,
So it's a mass scale.
yeah. I've
Yeah.
I've heard that they kind of do it in segments where like one person will have a vise, he'll do the wire wrap, pass the
Hmm.
vise, next vise comes down, he wraps the wire. Um, so yeah, very much a production line
Yep.
with like a bunch of tires. I guess one person for each step in theory, or
Yeah, kind of. I know the main factory that I deal with, it's a lot of. I think it's kind of cool because it's an opportunity for them to have employment over there, and it's a lot of moms that are working that otherwise wouldn't have a job. They're able to actually do it from home, which is really cool.
yeah.
So they don't have to travel too far. And so I think for the most part, that factory, they are tying the fly from start to finish. But I do
Okay.
know of some where they kind of do it that production line style.
Mm, yeah. I do that for certain flies where I tie, like, actually this is a good one. This is a stone fly, or
Oh
soon
yeah.
to be stone fly. It just needs some dubbing and a few other little things that I like to add to it. I definitely find that tying and like I set down how many beads and hooks I'm using. I'm like, okay, I'm
Yep.
going to tie 15 and I don't stop. If I'm doing it like this, I'll tie all the 15 with the legs, and then the next day I'll do all 15 with the dubbing and whatnot. Just to kind of, I think it speeds it up. It's hard to really judge it, but I think it does because you get so used to doing the same thing that
Yeah.
your spacing and everything gets like pretty on cue.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing because I do that a lot too when I'm doing like my production tying for myself. Is it keeps them consistent too? Keeps
Yeah.
all your flies very consistent. So you almost get down to the thread wrap. You know how many wraps you've done on that fly, and then you can pick them up tomorrow and finish them or whatever.
Is that something I'd never worry about my thread, or no, my thread wraps maybe, but my actual ribbing, I guess maybe a chronomid I would be a little more consistent on, but basically everything else it's like wrap it up. Do you find yourself pretty consistent with the same?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get too nitpicky with it unless it's like a wire body nymph, like a copper john I'm tying. Like you said, like a chironomid where I want a very specific spacing between those wire wraps. I don't worry too much about it otherwise, but yeah, I don't get too
Yeah.
nitpicky.
I don't know. I think it's like in our brain as well, or if everyone says it, but if you're fishing with confidence, you'll probably catch fish. And it's
Yeah.
funny, kind of relating back to when you were young and like reeling up your nymph and getting a fish.
Yeah.
If you tried to recreate that, it probably would never work again. You know what I mean?
I would have zero confidence in it.
Yeah, zero confidence. It's so funny. Like even we were out over the weekend and my buddy was just like ripping off his line from his spay rod. It was just a little 4-way trout spay. And his fly was in the water and he was like, dude, while I was ripping it off, I had a trout grabbing it. And then when I actually do my cast and it's out there swinging around, nothing. I was like, isn't that so weird? Like you try so hard, nothing. You
Yeah.
just throw it in, all of a sudden you go to fish.
Yep.
Yeah. So what's your season, Utah, right?
Yep.
Yeah. What's your season like out in Utah and what species do we see around there?
So we can fish all year. There's no closures or anything as far as rivers or lakes go, other than you get ice. So you end up ice fishing if you're into that. But river wise, you can open it. It's open all year. I guess there are certain areas where a lot of the native cutthroats, they'll close those sections. So like our certain sections of the river that I fish on the Logan River are closed until like the second weekend of July to help with the cutthroat spawn. So you're not fishing that. But the whole river is not closed, just certain areas. And that can be, I guess, kind of spotty throughout Utah. But for the most part, it's cutthroat, it's browns, and then our DWR likes to stock a lot of rainbows. So we have a love affair with little 8-inch rainbows. So they're fun. So
brown food.
yeah, pretty much. Yes.
I don't know. Have you ever seen Parks and Recs? That show? Yeah, Ron Swanson.
Oh yeah.
I just imagine him being like, "That's what my food eats," you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Just these little dinkers. Yeah. Well, and those are 3 great species to have around, I'd say.
Yep.
What's your favorite species there?
I love brown trout, I'll be honest. I know I love catching a native cutthroat. They're super cool. They're pretty, but man, there's nothing better than a good healthy brown. They're my favorite.
There's something about it, man. It's crazy to me because I love brown trout, so nothing against them.
Yeah.
But in a lot of areas, they've been introduced, so they're kind of like a non-resident.
Yep.
People love them.
Yep.
They don't necessarily fight the hardest, but they look the coolest, or they're up there in that looking. But I think it has to do with like the shoulders they get. They just look mean. They look badass.
Yeah.
You catch a rainbow that's 20, 24 inches, anywhere in that range, and you're like having a crazy battle. It's like a mini steelhead. It's awesome, but if it was a brown, you'd be much happier.
Yeah,
it's weird.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is because I've caught a lot of those juiced up rainbows that are just super pretty, big red stripe, and I'm just like, for a minute I thought it was a brown. There's that little bit of disappointment. You're just like, oh man.
Yeah, I caught a fish. That counts, right?
Yeah.
No, it's funny because like I see it on my raft all the time when I have guests on, and they're like, "Oh, it's a brown, it's a brown." Oh, and I'm like, "It's a rainbow," and they're like, "Oh," and I'm like, "It's still a
great fish."
Yeah, it's still good. But then I do that as well. I'm like, "Oh my god, that's a brown rainbow." Darn.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I do see how it's like. In our home water, they weren't there. They were introduced. Yet it's like they're protected.
Yeah.
I don't know. They got this special omen around them where everyone's just down. But yeah, they're an aggressive fish. Like when they do decide to chase something or you're nymphing or whatever, it's always just a dead stop and like a solid fish, which is nice. I know you said you really like Euroing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I probably do that the most, and I got into that 4 or 5 years ago. Oh, it's probably been longer than that now. I can't remember, but I hit that pretty hard. A buddy of mine got me into it, and I just, man, um, it was just super fun to do. Just tight lining it and feeling that connection. Like as soon as that fish hits you, oftentimes you can feel that bite, and I just love that. Whereas like indicator fishing, you don't get that feel most of the time. You see the indicator go down and it's fun, but I just like that feel of that fish just grabbing that nymph, and
Yeah.
you just have that instant connection to it. But I like that. I do like to streamer fish. I like to fish a lot of smaller streamers just because I think mostly part of that is I don't have access to like a big river. So our streams are pretty small in this valley that I live, so they're not. I never found the need for a big articulated streamer in them, and so I've kind of geared my fly tying towards that. But I just have found so much luck with small streamers, and even when I do go to a big river, still having luck on just like that single hook, 2 to 3 inch streamer has been really good too. So I'm just kind of stuck with it, and but yeah, that's probably my second favorite is just streamer fishing, and then the Euro nymphing is definitely by far what I do 90% of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something I've been dabbling with more and more is streamer fishing over the last few years. Kind of a late start to it. My river, like, yeah, I guess small streamers are still possible from shore, but on average, I'd say, like, if you're trying to catch fish on streamers, you're probably needing a raft of some sort.
Yeah.
At least a 2-man. So it makes it challenging. So it wasn't until I got my 3-man and started kind of, I fish with a few other people now that can row. So it's actually, because when you get a raft, you're not the one that's just fishing. You're not fishing the whole time. You'd think you would be, but then reality is you aren't. So you got to have friends that either already know what they're doing or be willing to teach your friends. And but yeah, so I've been getting more done on that. Do you find, because actually what interests me is that I've been fishing smaller streamers and getting more rainbows, because the big streamers, like I would say almost 99.9% of the time, we don't get rainbows. Our rainbows don't grow really past the 20.
Yeah.
22s a very good rainbow, and that's usually when they start to eat bigger streamers.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting you say that because we took a trip down the Green River here in Utah, and the A section, super popular stretch of river. And I was fishing this little. This is about the size of it, not the color, but just something just like that. This is basically a size 6, standard little streamer hook, and I had that with like a little cone head on it, and it was an olive color with kind of a brighter underbelly. And you say that, and thinking back, I caught a lot of rainbows on that, and there's a good healthy mix of rainbows and browns on that stretch. And my rainbows probably outnumbered my browns, 3 to 1 on that streamer. And then I've seen guys fish articulated stuff, the bigger stuff, and they catch those meatier browns with that. So there's definitely something to be said about, those bigger browns, bigger fish going to chase down and eat, those bigger flies. But yeah, so yeah, for sure. If there's rainbows present, I've definitely caught more rainbows on those single hook streamers than anything else.
It's a fun thing to kind of be unraveling on my end, not having like a ton of people streamer fishing around me. Like almost all my friends like streamer fishing, but once again, it's me rowing or whatever. So figuring out the streamer game has definitely been a fun one, and it's always cool to see the eats. But like you said, with the tight line of the Euro nymph, whenever my line is tight and then just all of a sudden goes, no matter how I'm doing it, that's my stuff. I love dry fly fishing. not a huge person on the bobber for rivers. If I'm doing chronomids, then on a lake, then for sure.
Yep.
But yeah, it's one of those things that tight line, there isn't anything like it when it's just
No.
there it is.
Yeah, it's so definite. It's fun. It's a fun way to fish.
Yeah. Are you? I guess you're going into spring just as everyone else is.
Mm-hmm.
So you're just kind of gearing up your own fly boxes currently. Has it been much fishing going on for you, or is it cold?
I try to go once a week. That doesn't really work well all the time, but I try to go once a week. So yeah, we've done a couple of trips. We like to go up to southern Idaho. There's a couple rivers we like to fish in southern Idaho, which is, for us, it's only about an hour away, so it's not a killer drive at all. And then my local stuff here, we're going to go down to the Green River here in the next couple of weeks with the blooming olives hatching. There, we always try to time that and get that, do some dry fly fishing down there, and we always end up nymphing, it seems like, but a lot of times we'll catch that just right, and there's a good pot of fish rising, and we'll do some blooming olive dry flies down there, and then yeah, so just the local stuff is also, as far as like my boxes go, I typically tie, obviously for myself, and then I do a lot with our business, so I'm trying to develop new stuff as I go. So I'm tying new stuff and trying that out, see if it's something we want to make in the coming year or two. And then obviously I'm just testing our flies as well. So yeah, I'm pretty heavy on filling up my box full of Euro nymphs and little tag flies, and that's kind of what I've been working on so far. So
Yeah.
my goal is to one day complete a full fly box. I've yet to do that. I fill up like 2 or 3 rows, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to work on my Stillwater box. So I start tying chronomids and leeches, and then I move on to like, oh, I'm going to do a hopper box. And I never.
Yeah. I feel like looking at mine, I just reorganized it. But same kind of thing, like there's this one last row, and I'm like, well, what do I need in there? Because I have my go-tos. I got my go-tos in bigger and smaller beads. And half the time when you're nymphing, it's just the right place. The fish do get picky, but I mean, if you got the staples, you got the staples. So
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I've been looking, my buddy's been sending me some photos, and me and him kind of bounce stuff up. Or I like to pull ideas from him, but yeah, we bounce back and forth, and I'll see something he ties, and I'm like, yes, that's a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he's really good at it. I don't know why. He just he'll fill a box. Like he's a box filler. It's crazy. He'll be like, oh, I'm doing cutty flies, and then a couple weeks later it's like a full box, and I'm like, yeah, I need fire under the belly, I need it to be like I'm guiding tomorrow and I have none of these flies. I'm going to try 30 of them right now,
Exactly. Yeah.
And then I'm good. I like the end of the season because then I just stop tying flies and it sizzles out. But yeah, I feel a few boxes, definitely my salmon flies, just like small things that I'll tie like a large amount of those. But at this point, I haven't been fishing a ton of salmon, so my box is just full. It's just there. But yeah, have you traveled and done any fishing around, or mostly in Utah?
Definitely the most in Utah, but yeah, so Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, we hit all those. Madison River in Montana is probably my favorite place on earth. I love fishing that river. But we go out to Pyramid Lake, try to do that out in Reno, out there in Nevada. Been to Louisiana red fishing. That was super fun. Love that. And my favorite trip that I did was just actually in October. I went up to Seattle and fished the Puget Sound up there for sea run cutthroat. And I never caught a sea run cutthroat. It was my target I wanted to catch. But I ended up catching surf perch and coho salmon. So I was just like, I'll take it. Definitely. And that the coho salmon that I caught were unreal. I mean, the fighting power on that fish was incredible. So definitely want to make that a trip again and get up there and do that. It was awesome. So
Yeah. Sea run cutty fishing is good. Tough. It's
yeah,
just they're there or they're not, and they my buddy does a lot of it, so I'm just kind of spewing out what he tells me mostly. But yeah, it can be very specific sometimes. But they're so aggressive. If they're going to hit it, they're going to smash it.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, any fish in the ocean, they're pretty strong.
Hmm.
Coho, sorry, I just flipped over to different screen. But yeah, the coho salmon, that's a good one. It's funny how you didn't catch sea run, but you caught a coho.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of
I don't.
almost backwards.
I mean, I got a lot of good help from the fly shops up there. The West
Yeah,
Waters fly shop up there. I can't remember, Port Angeles, Washington. There, they were super helpful, and they gave me a couple places to try, and yeah, just never came together for sea runs. But I got into this little bay, and my first cast, I was fishing I couldn't believe how small the streamers were that they were like suggesting. Just tiny, like, so, I mean, the streamers that I fished. I'm like, oh, this works perfect. And first cast, I mean, I'm sitting there just stripping it, kind of lazy. I wasn't really expecting to catch anything because I'd gotten skunked the first 2 days because we were up kind of north, up kind of by Bellevue or Bellingham, and we were kind of down along that southern section of the Puget Sound, and I was just kind of like, I'm just going to get skunked. Nothing's going to work. And then my rod just almost ripped out of my hand.
Hmm.
And I was like, holy shit, like that's a big fish. And I was just, so bringing it, I'm like, oh, it's a coho. And that one got off. But they were all just kind of stacked up throughout that bay. And I just kind of kept wandering around and I'd hook it into one. And so I landed a few. Most of them got off.
yeah,
But they were super fun to fight.
yeah. They're a great fish. Did they get airborne in the ocean?
Yes,
Yeah,
they did. Yep. And that was awesome. So,
yeah.
yeah. Closest
If
I've come to steelhead, I think, from what I've heard.
yeah, no, it's not. I've been skunked now 2 years in a row on my river. I've been really stubborn, and I've been trying to catch it on mostly classic flies. And this year,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just, but it's been tough. So it's a sensitive subject for me right now. You know, yeah, Sunday. So a few days, or no, yesterday or Monday. Yeah. So yesterday was my last day, going for them. And it was honestly one of the most stressful days I had because I kept I felt
Yeah.
that pressure of
Yeah.
I was deciding because I guess technically you could keep fishing for them, but there's just too many reds and there's,
Oh, yeah.
I would basically walk or run and make sure there was no reds. And it was starting to get to the point where basically every run had reds. So we just streamer fished for the rest of the day. And got one, but I lost it pretty much instantly. So got skunked anyways. I was like,
Yeah.
all right, all right. That's the way she goes. I sat down in the river for like a good 20 minutes and just stared into the abyss. Like, what have I done? Three months of fishing for this. That's 6 months over 2 years to not catch one. And I'll guarantee that next year I'll be out there doing it again.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah.
I've only been steelhead fishing once, and it was up in northern Idaho on the, was it the Clearwater Salmon River? And I got skunked, and you got to give it more than a day, but I was just kind of up there traveling through and had a buddy that lived up there in Lewiston, and he was kind enough to take me out and kind of show me, and he was like what you say, classic flies, that's what he was. And last year I went, it was a year ago in February of 2023, and he was, the numbers weren't high that year. It was a tough year all around from what I understand, so my chances were low to start with. But yeah, I mean, it, just to see one of those fish is incredible, and then hopefully to get it hooked up on your line is even better. And But yeah, hasn't come together for me yet. But I've only been once, so gotta give it some more effort.
If you would have got one and told me that you got one going once, I would have just hung up right here and
I
cried
wouldn't have told
myself.
you.
Yeah, good. Thank you. I appreciate that. Um, yeah, I got last year I got 6 grabs and like 3 good hookups for a split second. So I don't know if they're actually that good, but it just
Yeah.
happened so fast. And then this year it was 5 grabs and 0 actually hooked.
Wow.
And I just like every day that would go by, I'd just be like, okay, well, if I just go out again and again and again, like
Yeah.
it will happen.
Yeah.
It didn't happen. And the 3 days that I wanted to go out on a weekend, but didn't, even though I could have, were the 3 fishiest days from what I've gathered information from people, and I was like, I don't know. I see this. I see it's going to rain a bunch, and there's like cold weather coming. I'm like, perfect. I'll go out. I even took off time off work. If Steele had knew what I'd put myself through to try to catch them, I think they would have. I think they would have bit my fly a few more times this season. But yeah, they're really cool fish. I really like them. But then when trout season comes around, I'm so happy. Like
Yeah.
finally back to like catching fish and yeah, back to catching
Yeah, for
fish
sure.
pretty much. Yeah. Yeah, the Puget Sound, that would be a fun one. That's actually like pretty close. I'm on Vancouver Island.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're on Vancouver Island, so
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that's Canada.
Yeah, so it's very close. Like if you actually looked at the border between Seattle and Canada, we're like basically under the line the
Okay.
island is. So it's very close. I think it's like a 4 or 5 hour ferry or something like that.
Okay.
It could be in Seattle.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's super close. So we got very much similar fisheries. We got the sea run cutties. We get all the salmon, um, and all that good stuff. But yeah, sea run cutty fishing is super fun when it works out. But when you don't really know what you're looking for, it's definitely a tough gig to get into.
Yeah. That
Grinding.
Yeah, that was a total do-it-yourself trip too. Without the help of those shops around, I never would have caught a fish. So, but yeah, those do-it-yourself trips are sometimes. I mean, that's what makes or breaks you. A lot of times, it is a lot of fun to kind of learn that on your own and just be out there fumbling around, and it all comes together and it just works out. And you end up catching. I caught probably one of my favorite fish. Definitely one of my favorite fish I've ever caught. So it was a lot of fun. Definitely worth it.
That's super cool. It's interesting too because when we talk lakes or rivers, we're thinking about like how to read the water.
Mm-hmm.
Lakes are obviously harder in terms of it's just flat unless there's wind, I guess. But then you got to know about structure, how that kind of works, what to look for, and then obviously a depth sounder is a huge, almost a crucial help. But
yeah.
And then rivers, you can read them. If you ever fish them when they're low, that's really useful to like see. But then the ocean, it's all like tides. Like when you could be standing in a bay and having like 3 different tides come at you. So like it's confusing finding like where are they hiding in that. So yeah, that's a lot of groundwork to figure out a fishery like that.
Yep.
Anything in the ocean can be really good when it's good, but tough to figure out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very humbling.
Yes. Those humbling days though, they're good. I chalked up this year to just working on my cast, and my casting was getting good for two-handed. So
yeah,
we're happy. But yeah, I'm so excited to toss a few dry flies. We've been seeing big bugs hatching and lots of stones, lots of mayflies, caddis. I haven't seen yet, but I'm sure they're right around the corner.
That'll be fun. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
We're finally getting some good weather here, and it just snowed today. So,
Okay.
but yeah, we had first little blooming olive hatch of the year, and fish were actually looking up. And of course, I was nymphing, but I didn't care. I was catching fish. But yeah, then we've had bad wind and rain and snow now the last few days, and rivers are coming up and getting muddy, so now it's kind of can make it a little more harder for me anyways where I'm at. But trying to get into still water fishing a little bit more during these times when the runoff's happening, and that's one area that I definitely need to work on is my lake fishing. So it's kind of what I'm hoping to do a little bit more this spring.
I took several courses on Stillwater online, and they were super helpful. It's a different system, different game. Like we with the rivers and like the nymphs, it's like, well, what nymph you got, and
Yeah.
you switch your bug out or something. And maybe a bit of a depth change. Maybe you're too high, maybe you're too low, whatever that could be. But then with the lakes, you got huge amount of depth. How does that bug swim? Because it's swimming. It's not, there might be a bit of a current, but not really.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like lakes are having like all the different lines. If you're getting super serious, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, for sure.
Oh, you only got a type 3 sink? Oh man, you need a type 7
We're not catching fish today.
Yeah, exactly. But lakes can be really fun. I would like to go fish some lakes in the mainland because they have better stock trout. Do you guys have Penasque out there? Or like what do you have different strains of rainbows? Is I guess the better question.
I'm not sure what the strain would be on them. I'm not sure, to be honest with you.
Yeah, fair enough. Because we got Blackwater for sure, Penasque, Fraser Valley, and then I'm sure there's other ones that I don't know about, but those are the three main ones. And Fraser Valleys are just kind of like your very typical stocked lake trout. Don't fight super hard, just kind of like are there. And then the Blackwaters are like aggressive, just like streamer eaters kind of thing. Like they'll take like small bait fish and just more aggressive in general. And then the Penasque, they actually grow like sizable and eat chronomids mainly.
Yeah.
And or like they basically look like a steelhead, like a summer run steelhead, just like nice chrome dimes. But if you ever get a chance to come fish some of the lakes in BC, there's some pretty crazy ones with like 10, 15 pound trout. The 15-pound trout I haven't heard a ton of, but I've heard of them. So
yeah, they're there. I've seen a lot of stuff from BC is amazing trout on stillwater fisheries. It's unreal. I'll have to look into that and see what kind of rainbows they stock here. I couldn't even I'd look like a fool if I guessed and tried to tell you what they were. I'm not a
I only know it because I used to chase stocked. Like if I ever saw a certain species dropped in a certain lake, I knew I wanted to go there. But the first year I ever experienced the Blackwaters, which was cool. They were always doing the Fraser Valley, and then they dropped in the Blackwater, and it turned out like we were hitting chronomids, and it was just like the fishing was hot, but these fish were actually like running, and I was like, "What's gotten into these guys?"
Yeah,
and we looked at the stocking report, and I was like, okay. But yeah, the stocking reports can also kind of teach you something. This is just food for thought, but if you ever see like if it says fly only and no retention, especially in Canada, I'm not 100% sure of the US, but that's a good indication that it's probably a trophy lake. Yeah, so there's like little snippets like that can kind of give you a good idea. And then there's systems you can usually see when they've dropped root stocks in and stuff. So that's another little thing
I use that pretty heavily in Utah, and that's one thing that I've noticed too. And I think people don't realize that there's so much access to information online about your local like state fish stocking. And my biggest thing, honestly, so I use the stocking report, but what I've been doing a lot now is just tracking just the flows of each river. So I get on like and just check the CFS of each river, because that's a big indicator too of fish movement, bug life, bug activity. And so like for right now, like my local river is starting to go up, and there's a certain bench point where I'm like, okay, I know I can't get in and wade once it hits 300 CFS in these little streams. It's just not manageable. But if it gets down to 250, 200, it's like prime time, and a lot of guys stay away from it because they think it's so fast or it's blown out or whatever. But you can work those edges and work those pockets and still find fish that are actively feeding even in that higher muddier water. And I use that to my benefit quite a bit. And I think a lot of people overlook that or don't know about it, and so they don't utilize those resources, especially the government ones where the state is putting that information online. And you can use a lot of that information to show you like, oh, they've stocked this lake once in the last 5 years. Well, it might be an indication that the lake's doing really well. And so there's some big fish in there that are, lasting, or it might be a bust and they've stopped stocking it because they've all died off and it's just not worth it anymore. So there's a gamble there. But a lot of times I've found that it's the fish, if they haven't stocked it in a few years, the fish have grown and their growth rates have been really good, and you're going to catch some big fish.
Yeah, that's a good point. Both on the river and the stocking one. I know, high water. If you can find a spot to stand, you don't need to be in the water, especially if you're pro nymphing. Great fishing to be had. Even muddy water, I mean, as long as the nymph is within three inches of their face and they're hungry, you're probably going to get one. So yeah, I like fishing muddy water too. Like I know for browns, if there was just big heavy rain and the water's kind of muddied up, it's a good time to streamer fish. And the fish feel happy and safe because they're not visible from up high. So yeah, they go a little grabby. It does make it for a good fight too, as having extra flow. But yeah, I've been noticing the speed of the water is something I've been paying a little bit more attention to, and then obviously, the actual height of the river, when it's dropping, when it's rising. Those are all things that now I'm really after the last few years, I'm really starting to understand as an important thing to pay attention to. Do you find, is there any scenarios where you no, I'm not going fishing aside from blown out?
Oh man, not really. I don't mind fishing in the weather. Probably my duration, my longevity of being out probably shortens quite a bit from when I was back in college. But if it's not a total downpour, or I guess the one thing I hate is fishing in the wind. That's probably the biggest one. If it's big gusty wind, I don't love that condition. But I probably fished more this winter than I have in a long time, just trying to get out and go. And for me, just trying to learn, fish behavior, what they're going to eat. And a lot of people shy away from winter fishing because it's so cold, which, I get it. But also, it's harder to fish because those fish are more selective because there's just not as much food around. So you really have to dial in your presentation and getting that fly just right where the fish is going to eat it and grab it. Because a winter fish isn't going to travel that extra 3 feet to grab that fly versus a summer fish. So that's helped me to kind of learn a lot just about my own abilities, and then also just I guess building that patience and skill to be able to catch those winter fish. But no, I don't. I mean, I try to get out as much as I can in any conditions that I can. It typically doesn't scare me off too much.
Yeah, I'm same way. I mean, if it's chocolate milk, I know.
Yeah.
At least for the system I work the most, which is the Cowgen River. If it's chocolate milk, the next day there's a few good creeks around if it's the right season and
Sure.
salmon laying eggs, then you know. But yeah, the chocolate milk. It's always sad when you get to a spot that you think is going to be good, and it's just chocolate milk, and you're like, well, what now?
Yeah, exactly.
We all have a bit of a plan B, but no one actually expects to use it. So yeah.
Last year we had such a heavy snowfall and wet winter, so our runoff was horrible. So there was like no fishing in the spring, and we were like, well, we'll try to stillwater fish more. But even the lakes, there was so much water getting pumped into those lakes, and it was all just chocolate milk. So the lakes were just super stained and dirty, and that made it even tougher lake fishing. So there's, I mean, that's certain points where you're just like, we got out on the lake and we were just like looking at each other like, I don't think we're going to catch anything. And so that confidence just plummeted right off the start. And you just, we didn't, it was just a bad day. But you're like, well, what's plan B? It's like, well, we got the boats. We can't really go anywhere else. What do we need to do? So we just packed it up and go home.
Yeah. Sometimes, I don't know. I find now too, I mean, you got kids, so you also are like, well, if it's not the greatest day to be out, like I'm okay to go home a little early nowadays. Whereas before I'd be like, no, I'm staying out here till it's dark.
Exactly.
Yeah. As far as your Euro setup, what does that look like?
So I have I want to say it's a scientific angler. It's just my rig, basically my line. I used to make my own leaders when I first started, but then they like Rio and Scientific Anglers came out with their own like Euro line, and I bought one of those, and I was just like, yeah, that's super easy. I don't have to mess around with the leader formula. So I just run one of those, and then I usually have like an 18-inch cider on there, and I run a lot of 5 and 6X tippet on that, and I traditionally have pretty good sized anchor fly with my tag up, 18 to 20 inches above my anchor fly. So that's pretty common for what I run most anywhere. Obviously, if I fish, like I said, the Madison River up in Montana, I'll obviously size up my tippet a little bit there, 4X, 5X on that river. But for the most part, I fish pretty light around here. We don't have a lot of big fish anyways. So I feel like getting away with 6X is pretty easy and makes the fight a little bit funner too.
Yeah. Yeah, you're a little bit more gentle on it.
Yeah.
With still getting, that's good. I have never Euroed 2 flies. So I would imagine that's just very convenient.
It's super convenient. And the nice thing is if they're dialed in on the tag fly, so then your anchor fly doesn't even matter. You're just using that for weight at that point to get it down. But man, I've had days where you've caught fish on both flies, and that's a lot of fun. Where you catch little rainbows on both fly, and you get 2 in 1, and it's super cool. So when they're really going at it and they're dialed in, you can catch 2 fish at a time, and makes it even better.
Yeah, a little bonus. It's like it's kind of like you're catching twice the weight, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Do they swim the same way, or do they fight against each other?
A lot of times they'll fight against each other. They go away from each other, and so you're like, and a lot of times they'll break off because you got that different, tension point, and you're just like, ah, crap. But I mean, typically they're not big enough to really do any damage, anyways. So, but yeah, they typically don't like to be by each other.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I got one on a streamer. Well, 2 fish on. I was in Alberta, which you're allowed to in Alberta, have 2 flies. I think you can do 3 flies. But now that's really excessive. In BC, it's 1 fly only.
Yeah.
1 fly only and barbless. No, if it's fly only, no indicators. So like there's all these kind of special things, and you go out into Alberta and you're just a free bird. Do whatever the heck you want. Leave your barb, cast 3 flies, whatever you want to do. So but I did get 2 fish, but it was basically like the last second the second fish grabbed on to like a trailing leech, and yeah, it was just kind of like, oh my goodness, it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
exciting. It was fun. So yeah, no, that's good. And then as far as the rod you were using, I don't know if you mentioned that.
So I've got two. I've got a Sage. What is it? Sage Sense. It's a 3-weight, and it's
Okay.
a 10-foot 6. And then I have a Cortland. I think it's a professional, and it's also a 3-weight, but it's an 11-foot rod. I think is what it is. So I switched between both. My reels, honestly, I don't even worry about the reel setup on that. My one's an old Lamson that I took the dry fly line off that was all bad, and I just made it my hero reel. And then I bought a little Reddington, I think it's a Run little reel for my other one. So I kind of switch back and forth. I go back and forth between that Sage and that Cortland, but man, I like that Cortland a lot. Both rods are good, but I find myself more and more fishing that Cortland a lot. It's just got a better feel to it as far as like how it handles in my arm and my hand. So I fish that a lot more. If I'm going on a big trip, I take both just in case I break one. But I'll start with that Cortland rod before I'll start with that Sage. It's just, like I said, it just makes my arm feel more comfortable as I'm bringing that fly down through the runs.
Yeah, fair enough. I did experiment a bit with like just adding more weight and Euroing if having a heavier reel is nice because then it helps kind of hold everything upwards.
Yeah.
So yeah, now everything because I bought a lot of reels when I first started, and then I started buying reels that had extra spools, and that's a bit of a game changer when you're
Yeah.
first getting into it, or like I do the guiding thing, so having one reel with 3 spools and all 3 spools having something different,
Yep.
is super convenient. Really good too for lakes. I have a lake reel. I actually have 4 of the same reel. 2 for guiding and 2 for myself. And that was, I just kept buying the same one because I was like, well, I just have more spools. Like I was like,
Yeah, exactly.
I'll use that on anything, right?
Yep.
Use it on a 3, 4, or 5-weight. I don't care. Because at that point it's like, well, that's 300 Canadian, so I think it's like $360 or something.
Yeah.
Per reel versus buying, a $300-400 reel and then buying one more spool and then buying another spool. Gets a lot.
Yeah, for
Reels
sure.
reels can get a lot. So
Yes, they can.
yeah. Did you like that Lamson? I know you said it was a little older, but
Yeah, I do. I've got 2 Lamsons, and they're definitely older. I haven't bought a new Lamson for a while, but yeah, I've enjoyed them. They've held up pretty good for me. Honestly, I have a Sage. I can't remember the name of the reel, but I have a Sage for a 5-weight and for my 7-weight that I use probably the most now. Those reels are pretty slick. I love those.
The Spectrum.
Yes, Spectrum. Yep.
Spectrum C.
Yep. That's the one.
Yeah. I just got mine back from repair, so I'm very excited. I took it out in minus 4 degrees, so that's like very cold.
Yeah.
So whatever that equates to you. Yeah, so it was it was broken and it was gone for a bit, and then I got it back and I'm a very happy camper. But yeah, I think I have 2 others, 1 or 2 other um because they are such a good reel. I like them. Um, they're just nice, and then you can also like spool them up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I did buy an extra spool for my 7-weight because that's what I took up to the Puget Sound. So I had an intermediate line on it, and then also like a Type 2 or Type 3 line on the other spool. But I ended up just using that intermediate line because I was just fishing so shallow. So, but yeah, that reel. I love that reel. Good reel.
yeah. I do really like casting an intermediate. It's so nice.
Yeah.
I feel like you're a great caster.
Yes, absolutely.
It's such a good feeling. Like a sinking line, that I can do it, no problem, but it's also like it's just one to do some weird shit at the end.
Yeah.
And then when you go back from an intermediate to like a dry line, you're like, you know what I mean? It just feels so good. But yeah, I find that's the one I fish the most on the lakes. If they're really deep, maybe I'll go to my type 3. I don't have a type 7. If I bought one, it would be type 7. If like in my books, in my mind, it's get a type 7, get a type 5, or sorry, a type 7 and a type 3, and then an intermediate and a dry fly line. Like you'd be pretty set for the first while, um, on a lake, I think.
Mhm.
Because then when if you get really specific on certain bugs and you want it to actually sink at a certain speed, then you can get the other sinking lines. But for me, yeah, an intermediate's like that's groovy. I just like fishing it. I like casting
Yeah.
it. I like just sitting there and counting and feeling some grabs along the way and
Yep.
kind of honing in on them. Like from the course I took, it was also a really good way to search because your line's just dropping nice and evenly, slow going. So when you do feel those bites and you're counting in your head, you can kind of hone in on where they are in the lake, what depth they're kind of feeding at. So yeah, but casting them super sick.
Yeah, it's a breeze. I love it.
Mhm. And do you still like what's the bug life out there? Just everything normal? Do you
Yeah,
still
pretty standard
fish the
stuff.
stringers?
Yeah, so we've got one. It's pretty fun. We got one creek here in our valley that has salmon flies that hatch, early June, and that's pretty cool to have that in your backyard. So that's always fun to go hit that. But other than that, it's pretty much your standard. We have a ton of caddis, really good caddis hatches on the Logan River. Like I said earlier, there's just tons of native cutthroats in that river system that, late summer nights, you go up there, fish till dark, and you can just hear the grabs when it gets dark, and it's a lot of fun to catch those little fish. But yeah, the caddis hatches are pretty amazing here. We actually have a really good green drake hatch.
Nice.
On the Blacksmith Fork. There's a ton of green drake nymphs in the river. I've actually never timed it well to hit that hatch. I think it's pretty short. But buddies I've talked to said that they've timed it pretty good and have gotten into it. So that's one that is really fun if you can time it right. But yeah, so other than that, pretty standard stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, green drakes, are they like pretty big?
Yeah, they're pretty good sized ones.
Yeah. I saw one green drake hatch and it didn't last very long, but it was like where they were dense as could be.
Yeah.
And just like so easy to see them from a distance, just like parachuting down the river.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah,
That's a big mayfly.
it is a big mayfly. It's just cool to see like a really large hatch happen.
Yep.
It's kind of mind-boggling when you see like the sheer number. Like when you envision it and you've never seen it, it's like there's going to be a lot. But then when you actually see it, and it's like I've talked to a few people on my river and that have said like they've seen bigger ones than the ones I've seen. To the point where you have to like keep your mouth closed because they're just like they're covering their arms, they're covering the oars, just all over the place. Pretty wild.
Yeah. We've had caddis hatches where we've got them, they get all over in your clothes and everything, and you're driving home and they're just flying in your truck.
Yeah.
You got the windows down trying to blow them out, and then they get so thick that they're up in your hat, they crawl up underneath, they're in your hair. It's crazy. It's fun to see that. So
yeah, that's awesome. Well, man, I think I covered everything I kind of
cool.
pondered about. I guess we could just finish it up with what you're working on now with the box. Is it still just the nymphs you were saying? Just make sure.
Yeah, for the most part, I'm working on kind of a dual thing. I'm doing a nymph box. I don't have it; it's in my pack. And then I'm working on a little, just like a little still water box. Just kind of working on balanced leeches. You can see my chironomid side over here is not very full yet, but that's just kind of what I've been working on, picking away at it. So I need to get going on it because all the ice is melted off now, and I'm already behind. So kind of working on that for my still water game.
You just got to utilize your kids really well. Like, okay, this is what we need to tie, and then you get this tasty treat, and then
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
They think they love Mountain Dew. They're like, I want to drink Mountain Dew. I was like, well, fill up my box,
Fill this
and
box.
I'll give you a Mountain Dew.
Yeah, you'll get your Mountain Dew. That's funny. That's every fly fisherman dad's dream right there.
Yeah,
Their kids
exactly.
their flies.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate it, Court. It was a lot of fun having you on, and I hope you have a good season out there.
Appreciate it. Yeah, you too, Andrew. Nice talking with you, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. Well, tight lines, and I'm sure we'll keep chatting.
Okay, sounds good.